We're moving forward with the Heidegger's guidance in his lecture series of 38, 39 to Nietzsche's essay on use and abuse of history for life. It's not clear what Heidegger's doing. We don't really know what his technique amounts to. We can say it is not this fact value technique of the what we looked at before, the dominant, planetarily dominant doctrine of the close reading, because we're not just trying to take facts out of the text and then make a very strong argument, which we can always point to the facts in the text. We're doing something that's not totally clear. Heidegger seems to be putting a new look. We don't really know what a hermeneutic circle is, let's say. He seems to be putting a new look on some things in Nietzsche. So he's saying, he's making a series of comments about, is Nietzsche just arbitrarily, or quote unquote accidentally bringing in the animal? No. He says the whole Western tradition has, quote, posited the realm of animality as the fundamental measure for any essential determination of the human being, unquote. Nietzsche does, obviously Nietzsche is aware of the notion of the genus of the animal and the specific difference of man as the talking animal or the reasoning animal. He knows that, but he doesn't say anything about that here. He talks directly about the animal. Heidegger, in a way, belies his own hermeneutic addition, as it were, or not necessarily. Addition brings us into an English way of thinking, in a way. You say he sees something else in it. So the hermeneutic circle could be understood in the following way. Socrates all the time says he doesn't know about certain things. I don't know. Let's say he's saying in this case, I don't know what history is, or I don't know what the animal is. But he'll say, I don't know what virtue is. Arte, in the Meno, for instance. But he must know in some way, because otherwise, how is the conversation even starting? He has some soupçon or some suspicion of what it is. And beside from that, he knows in the vernacular what this word means. Why have Meno and Socrates come together to discuss something that they are wholly ignorant of? It's not possible. So there's something there already that they're discussing, but they might glimpse something in it that wasn't there before, and give themselves a new outlook on it. Heidegger says here Nietzsche has shown us a horizon in which we're going to understand what history is through these determining beginnings of the animal and the human being as this immaculate animal. Heidegger's, as we mentioned before, Heidegger says this is one-sided. Here we have this animal on the one side, total forgetfulness, and are not even able to forget. And on the other side, this wretched human being, which reminds of not Frank Zappa, but of, I think his name is Peter Zapfa, who produced this philosophy of antinatalism. Maybe other people had already had that idea, but if you think of the image of the, he makes the example of an extinct species of elk or something along the lines that the horns grew so large that they can no longer support their necks. And you think also of, there's a letter somewhere in Hold the Line that Nietzsche was aware of where, I may have mentioned this before, but like I said, some of the videos were erased, where Nietzsche says the Greeks were really alive, and they just looked up towards this these theoretical questions, and he says that Socrates is the first theoretical man. But whereas the Germans are, even to understand their own emotions, they go into some, they live so much in theory that they can't grasp their own, see their own feet, as it were. Heidegger says here, which touches on his whole thinking entirely on the theory, on the subject matter of negation, aletheia. He says Nietzsche here is saying not that the animal is unhistorical, but rather that the animal has no history. It's deprived of history. So it's the kind of being that can have a history, but it forgets. I don't know if that's exactly what Nietzsche's saying here. Nietzsche says the animal doesn't even forget. It's not clear that there's really a contradiction there. But in any case, maybe we are the kind of being that could have truth, and therefore we are deprived of that. But we can still, when Heidegger speaks of the steadfast resolution, it's as though he would say we have complete confidence that we're going to get to this truth, because it's not that we're untruthful beings, as you might say in this Nietzschean radical. Even Nietzsche doesn't say that in these early works. He says, well, maybe there's a mistake. Maybe the Übermensch is somehow mistaken, because the whole history of the West that led us to this view of the radical perspectivalism, or is mistaken. So Nietzsche is more diffident in a way. The whole thing appears to him in the light of greater dubitation in a certain sense. Heidegger insists on taking a stand towards what he's trying to get to. So to continue on that thought, there's something here that Heidegger, in a way, just simply ignores. Nietzsche says early here, he cites somebody called Niebuhr, Barthold Niebuhr, I believe this. Yes, he was in the Prussian scene, not the theologian of the same name. History, he says, I'm citing Nietzsche's text, is useful for one purpose, if studied in detail, that men may know, as the greatest and best spirits of our generation do not know the accidental nature of the forms in which they see and insist on others seeing. Insist, I say, because their consciousness of them is exceptionally intense. He goes on to say, someone will read the deeper emotion into these forms. Forms in this context can mean, if you look at Spengler or somebody like that, and you think of Gothic architecture and all the various things, the Renaissance, and anything that has a style, is something specific that human beings can carry out as a form. And in this case, Heidegger is a form for us. So it's Heidegger reading a deeper emotion into this question of the being Frage, and we're simply carried away with it. Nietzsche, I would say, challenges us with that question. The whole question of genus, which isn't brought in here, ties into the time where Nietzsche's writing. This is very important. Heidegger, in his notes here, he links Nietzsche to Leibniz, to Herder, to Goethe. So we're pushing back into not just the debut de Cecile of the 19th century, but back even into the 18th century. And when you go back into the 18th century, you get this very alien feeling of the we're about to become very excited by our new acquaintances with something called evolution, but we're not quite there. And Herder it's very strange when you read Herder. He had some opinions in his time. The issue of the possibility of species extinction came before the eyes of the most educated people. And that this is also, we should not forget that in Nietzsche's time, the vast, almost infinite gap between the educated and the uneducated, which never appears to us today, was omnipresent. You can read that in the early works of Jung, too. You can see how it's not simply a question of some kind of the professors who have a aristocratic sense of superiority over the democratic mind. It's de facto. There was not general education at that time, and we today seldom encounter people who don't have primary education, at least a primary education. The gap is much greater than we realize now. The issue in Herder links to some of the questions on the animal here. Herder is still thinking prior to evolution. Obviously, Nietzsche knew about this idea of evolution, which he still describes in philosophic terms, in terms of the transformation of the essences, and this kind of talk that doesn't even link up to the biology in some way. But Herder didn't know about that, and you think in the first passage in this essay, it gives the impression of an eternal rising up of life out of an eternal field where all the species exist. Even I think Alexander von Humboldt in the middle of the 19th century still thought maybe he can find some brontosauruses in South America, this kind of thing. This is a different way of thinking. Lamarck didn't exist yet for Herder's way of thinking. If we go back into Herder's way of thinking, there are still this idea of the Genesis ton eidon, of which would be the Greek. Leo Strauss gives this nicely in one of his essays. If you translate out Darwin's title, "The Origin of Species," into Greek, you get Genesis ton eidon. And this is the origin of the ideas. So this idea of the genus, man, which Heidegger brings in, comes into this whole Western thinking of the eternal genuses, the eternal ideas. All right, let's go further into the next time.